In the Bible, Paul explains that everyone has two bodies, a physical body and a spiritual body. Mediums use their spiritual bodies when they act as a communication bridge between the physical and spirit worlds. As a spirit speaks, mediums hear the information using the ears of their spiritual bodies, then repeat the information to other physical people. Mediumship is synonymous with the biblical term, gifts of the Spirit. The focus of our show, Making Known the Unknown, is to provide knowledge through the use of Reverend Hewitt's mediumship and Sidney Schwartz's research. The Bible contains the history of psychic events, along with man-made doctrines created by priests centuries ago. This show will explore the untruths which the Bible entrenched into our society. By uncovering these untruths, we encourage people everywhere to think for themselves with a critical mind.
Hello, and welcome to Making Known the Unknown. I'm your host, Tina Tarryk, and with me are my guests, Sidney Schwartz, middle school teacher from Hackensack, New Jersey, and Bible researcher of 25 plus years. How many of you out there can say that? Especially if you're a minister or a priest. Okay.
Thank you, Tina. Hi.
Hi. And Reverend Hewitt, founder and pastor of Gifts of the Spirit Church in Chesterfield, Connecticut, and medium. Unusual combination, folks, Reverend and medium. We're going to knock your socks off. Okay. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And tonight's show, we're going to actually discuss healing with wine. And one of the pieces that's important for everyone to know is that wine is related to the ascended grape. And for all of you who are curious as to what that means, stay tuned and you'll know exactly what we're talking about. But before we jump into that, I always like to throw in a couple of zingers with some current events that are going on. And one of those current events, actually it's not even, well, it is an event. I guess we'll call it an event. It's the Muslim stamp that's going to go on sale shortly. And I'm hoping that we have a graphic of that in the control room.
We do.
That's ready. If we could put that up, please. And while that's coming up, I'll just talk a little bit about it. And it came to my attention because I, like many other people, have received one of these massively mailed email messages. Everyone can see the stamp. If you go to the USPS postalservice.com, you'll see that the stamp is coming out to commemorate, what is the holiday, Sidney?
Ramadan.
Ramadan, okay.
Which is coming to a close very shortly.
All right. I'm not sure which post offices are having these. I'm guessing that almost all of them will be selling them at some point. And what I wanted to do was to share with our viewers, as I was saying, an email that I had received that was one of those mass copied emails that they kind of send to everybody. And I wanted to share with you two sides of that story with respect to this stamp. Evidently, it's not being well received, and there's a little bit of an outrage with the email that I received, although I don't know who personally it came from. I'll just read a couple of the items here. This email is asking everyone to boycott the stamp when you go to the post office because there are Americans, it's like a slap in the face to Americans who died at the hands of those whom this stamp honors. And some of the other messages on this particular email that some of you may have seen are, remember the Muslim bombing of Pan Am Flight 103, remember the Muslim bombing of the World Trade Center, remember the Muslim bombing of the Marine barracks in Lebanon. And then, of course, it goes on and on to talk about the attacks on 9/11. And then there was a person who had actually a response to the Muslim stamp boycott. And I thought that was very interesting, so I was going to read a little bit about that. And then I'd like to know what Carl and Sid have to think about this particular topic. And this person writes, to all my brothers and sisters, in regards to the Muslim stamp boycott emails I've received, I must protest to the unchristian-like manner in which this is being passed around. I must admit that I'm rather surprised at receiving this from some of you. I believe that we should not boycott a stamp which represents one of the largest religious groups, if not the largest, on the earth, of which only a small percentage have had a hand in the atrocities which are mentioned in the emails. Most Muslims are law-abiding citizens of their countries who believe in living in peace with others. They are our neighbors, our friends, even our family and co-workers. Why should we punish them because of a few people's acts? When we choose to single out an entire group of people because of what one small percentage does, we lower ourselves down to the lowest level of that small percentage and are ignorant of what Jesus had taught us. And of course, he goes on to quote a few things that Jesus has said out of the Bible. And then it finishes with, remember the Christian slaughter of the American Indians. Remember the Christian destruction of the Aztec civilization. Remember the Christian slaveholders. And finally, remember the Christian witch hunts of Salem and other places. So I thought that that was a very fitting response to something which probably for the average person who would have seen that email would not understand that Muslim is not equated with bad or terrorist automatically, no more than Christian is. And I wanted to get the ball rolling with that. Sid?
Well, I'm sure the stamp came out because the post office has a Christmas stamp, it has a Hanukkah stamp, it has a Kwanzaa stamp, so now it has a stamp for Ramadan. And I'm sure that's where this came from. And it's a touchy situation because basically you can see both sides, you know, because it's there's logic behind both sides, but hopefully we'd be on the side that's more tolerant and recognizes that the terrorists are just a small group of people.
Thank you. Carl, do you have any thoughts that you'd want to share?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I don't care what kind of flag these people fly. All over the world, there are bad people that fall through the cracks, and they can be easily led by others that uses mind control to get them to do exactly what they want to do. I mean, I came from the South where at one time it was like you wouldn't even dare be friends with a person who had black skin. I went through all of that, and there's things that I had to deal with as a kid. And to me, it's just absolute ignorance. And the way I feel at the present time, this country has been too open with our borders. They just let everybody in, the good ones, the bad ones, and the ones in between, you see. I think something should be done there. There's some of the back presidents have made some, as far as I'm concerned, big mistakes on opening the borders. It's getting worse all the time. Something has got to be done. There's wonderful people in this country, and I'm sure that they are the Islamic, but we have Christians that are even worse, because I'm lucky to be alive sitting in front of these cameras now because of some of the, I won't use those words on this live TV program, but what I had to deal with simply because I was born with the gifts of the Spirit. And these are Christians with a Bible in their hand. And they did everything but lynch me, and that's why I wound up in the Northeast, to get out of their way. And there's a few of them that have made changes, but not too many.
So do either one of you have a personal vendetta against the, I shouldn't say the U.S. Post Office, but because this particular stamp is being promoted or sold?
Not me.
No.
Okay. Okay.
Live and let live.
Okay. Great.
You know, you can go into the Bible, and one verse comes to mind right now. It's Matthew chapter 5, verse 30, where it says, if your right hand offends you, you should cut it off, because it's better for a party to lose part of your body than your whole body burn in hell. You don't see too many Christians following that, you don't see too many one-armed Christians going around. So people look at that and they say, that's a metaphor. That's not to be taken literally. And from what I understand of the Quran, which is the Muslims' holy book, there's a lot of references there to killing the infidel and getting rid of people who are non-believers and things along those lines. And so when people say that Muslims are peace-loving, they must know what's a metaphor in their holy book, just like the Christians know what's a metaphor in theirs. But other people look at it fundamentalists will look at it and say, well, it's in the Bible, it's written this way, therefore they believe they're warlike people, So it's just something you should be aware of it with the Islam, because there are statements in there that are very controversial, and the mullahs have the Islamic scholars have debated exactly what that means, and doesn't mean doesn't mean that they should be violent and things like that. And I think the answer is no, but that argument's out there.
Okay, great. Thank you. I also threw that out because, as we do with this show often, with many of the things that we discuss, we ask you to think for yourself. And I hope that you will give that some thought and balance that in your mind and not automatically negate it just because it's a Muslim stamp. I think if you rise above and you can see that there's a lot of ignorance around you, then you'll make the choice for the right reason. There was one other thing I wanted to touch upon quickly, only because I remember that Carl has spoken of this man and a few other shows that we've produced as being a person who actually possesses the gift of the Spirit, one of many. And he appeared not too long ago at a casino near here, and that's David Copperfield. And I had been reading an article about his appearance, and it really, this particular person who wrote this article says essentially that David Copperfield just continues to astound audiences at a time when you'd think you've seen it all, and he really rises above what all the others do, and he's really sort of the king of magicians. But what I've been told and learned in other shows is that, in fact, he's really not a magician. He really
He's one
does.
of the greatest mediums that was ever born, but not as great as Jesus.
Okay.
Totally is as a
he
medium.
really does have the gifts of the
Absolutely.
Spirit.
He also has the gift of showmanship.
Yeah.
So when he marries the two together, he comes away with more fantastic ways to show the same gift of dematerialization and materialization, because that's basically most of what he does. It's the same gift in different forms that he performs.
So he has a couple of illusions here that they talk about. One's a cocoon, an instantaneous body transformation, flying, defying the law of gravity, and snow illusion, in which crystalline flakes descend from between his fingers. And so those, you would say, are absolutely because of his gift.
Well, the flying is levitation,
Okay.
and the snow is aports. The gift of aports is making something appear where it wasn't there before. So he has those gifts along with dematerialization, and because this all falls under the heading of physical mediumship. He's a physical medium.
So whether people realize it or not, they are appreciating someone who's a medium amongst them.
Exactly. You see, if we want to go in the Bible and use some of the scripture, we're born with two bodies. There are two lives, two bodies. And those in the other dimensions, they have a tremendous amount of power. Even though they're invisible to our physical eyes, they can do all of these wonderful things, causing a person's body to become light as air, and he just flies out over the audience and comes back on the stage. I've seen him do that. I saw him in Hartford, whereas he got on a motorcycle way in the back of the stage, and in one split second, he was right over there on the same motorcycle, and the thing was roaring like crazy. He's a great medium. The thing is, as I've said before, take this other medium, the one that Andre Coles. Well, you look him up on the internet, you'll find out that the Baptist Church has him under contract, and they pay him $1 million a year.
A church has a medium on their payroll. How's that?
Baptist religion has it because they don't want him out there posing as a gifted person or a medium, because they don't want people to know this. This is why there's so many ministers and priests and rabbis that's against work I do. They don't want public to know this. This is why you've heard the story about how they treated me at Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, is simply because they don't want their people to know this. Because once they know this, you're not under mind control anymore. You're free. You don't have to go to church. When you die, you're going to go to the other dimension. There's no such place as hell. That was all created.
So this particular religion is using this man for sensationalism to get people to come to the church.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I see.
He has to get up there at first before he does any of his goody stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He talks to him about Jesus and something. It's some biblical story that he tells, and of course he does a good job at that too.
Very
I've been in
interesting.
several of his shows. He's just a damn good medium.
Okay,
That's all there
folks.
is to it.
So the next time you see David Copperfield, if you go to a show, we hope you think a little differently. If you're looking for strings or gadgets or wires, there won't be any, right?
Nope.
No,
Okay.
there's no such thing.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. This sort of falls under the category of did you know? And it was made aware to me that the founding person of the Christian Science Reading Room, some of you might have heard of that, or the Christian Science Monitor, I believe that that's their particular publication, that the founder was a medium.
Absolutely.
And her name was Mary Baker Eddy. And what I'm going to do is turn it over to our experts to share that with you.
Okay, well, I'd like the control room to pull up the graphics we have of her. We have some pictures of her.
Okay.
And you might want to start talking about her, because you know her better than I do.
Well, Mary Baker Eddy, see, her first husband was Baker Eddy. She's married 4 times.
Oh, okay.
And she was a very, very good medium, but she used her mediumship to as healing.
Okay.
And any person that's a healer is a medium, because after all, it is the energy coming from the other world, and the medium, that is the person that's physical, is the one in the middle between the 2 dimensions. And so she became such a very good medium, and people followed her everywhere. And finally, there was somebody, the last husband, he talked her into forming her own church. And she did. And when you go into my place, you notice the door going into the reading room, it says reading room.
Right.
Well, she had, it looked like a diary that she had, and everyone that visited her for a reading, she would say, visited with Tina at 10 a.m. in the reading room. It was always in the reading room, in the reading room. And so when all these people, her followers, got together to help her out, help her get started with this, there was a group of them, and they were all trying to figure out what they could do, and yet there were so many of them. And this one group of people wound up in her office in the reading room, and they noticed that there was this book, appointment book, and everything she said was in the reading room. So they thought, they did not realize that this was psychic readings. They thought it was a place you gather to read the Bible and all this biblical stuff. And so they organized, they formed this organization to create the reading rooms, and they had them all over this world, all over the planet. And you could go in some places today and it says Christian Science Reading Room. You see, this is all it was. It was not a place you go in and read the Bible.
But Carl, isn't that what people do there now? Isn't that the interpretation now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is they all gather and they have Bible reading groups?
Yes.
Yeah. I did a lecture down at the subbase in Groton one year, and all of the officers' wives gathered there because their husbands were out on maneuvers in the Mediterranean. And when I brought up Mary Baker Eddy, I didn't realize there were so many of the ladies in that room that belonged to that religion, you see. And when I ever mentioned the fact she was a wonderful medium, they almost threw the chairs at me. They were angry. And all of a sudden, coming right out of me, somebody else took over my vocal cords and told them, go to the Groton Library, and told them even the number, where to go to. And there was 2 cars that went down. I think it was 8 ladies that went down there. And they went in, and they came back with books to prove that she was a medium. And some of those people were shocked. They were absolutely shocked, because when they formed that religion, there was no mention at all that she was a medium. None at all. They would try to hide it. She was a great medium, too.
So the question is, how did it go from Mary Baker Eddy actually doing readings or healings to what is currently known today as the reading room, which is just about Bible reading?
Well, they just did not tell the people the truth about it. It's just like we're on this program trying to get people to open their mind and think for themselves. If people were thinking for themselves, they would realize evidently some of those people that was involved at that group, they never went there for a private reading.
It's just like there was a medium, her last name was White, I can't remember her first name. She was the founder of the Seventh-day Adventists.
Yeah.
She was a medium.
Really?
And they don't do any mediumship anymore in that religion either. Most religions were founded either by a medium or through a psychic event,
Yeah.
one of the two.
I mean, that actually would make sense, because if you have someone who's able to share something that's phenomenal, not of this that can predict future events, something that's big with respect to sharing the truth and knowledge that they didn't know or they couldn't find around them, it would make sense that these places were founded on that. But
Right.
what happened? What's
Let me
happened
share.
to them?
Let me share something with you people. 2 weeks ago, I went to New York to visit a medium that I've heard so much about from Florida. Excellent medium, and I mentioned when it was all over with that I had heard about the church that he's the pastor of, and I mentioned going through that city and seeing the church, and I said I didn't realize that they had such a well-organized spiritualist church there. Well, he cut me off short. He says it is not a spiritualist church. And see, spiritualist churches usually has a medium and has a pastor.
Okay.
Sometimes the pastor is the medium. But in this case, he cut me short, and he says, my church is the living church of God. I stood there with my mouth open for a minute because he was really telling the truth. Because any church on this planet, I don't care what the label is, if there is a medium there, to me it is the living God that is there. Because God is within all of us. All of us. I don't even like that word spiritualist anymore because it's been so badly tainted, just like the word psychic been tainted. You see?
When a medium's before a congregation and is delivering a sermon, most of the time what happens is that the medium doesn't even know what's being said.
Yeah.
Or if the medium plans to say ABC, he goes to A to Z in what he says. And a lot of the stuff he hadn't planned to say, it just kind of happens. And that's because spirit is there influencing the medium. And therefore, it's coming from the God realms. So it is the living God speaking through. It's not a stagnant reading of a book that most religions go through, because it's that, no, this hasn't changed. Yeah, it changed. There's 300 versions of it, and there's different wordings of it, but it's generally the same contents in there. Nobody goes and changes this week to week to week. Where when you have a medium, you're getting constantly new information, constantly evolving messages coming through. And this is why when there's a medium in a church, it's not stagnant. It's continuously changing, continuously growing and evolving.
There's a spiritualist camp in Upper New York State, and I was asked to come up there and close that. I believe it was in 1979, if I'm not mistaken. And I invited Sid and another one of my students to go with me because it's a long drive up there. And I would let him tell you that, because when I stepped out on that stage, and I don't remember another thing. He let me listen to the tape later on, and he said he'd never heard anything like it in his life coming out of me. You see, because I instantly went into a trance state. Somebody took over my body, used my vocal cords, and all of it came out.
It was a phenomenal lecture. And there were times where I could tell that the entities were changing. A different entity was slipping through because his speech patterns would change, and then somebody else would go through. But it was just stunning. I've listened to that tape recently, and the interesting thing about it is that it didn't strike me as powerful as it was in person. And that's because when you're in front of a medium live, okay, the energy that comes into the room, your soul responds to that. So your soul is like expands and is gaining enlightenment just from the energy alone, besides the knowledge. So, and of course, when you listen to the tape, that energy is absent. So it's a little flatter from just the tape itself. But there's nothing like being in the presence of a medium, who's delivering a message from spirit.
Well, I can tell you that that's not something unusual with respect to producing these television shows, because oftentimes we'll discuss a topic that we're going to get into detail about, and we maybe go into a different direction.
Yes.
Because Carl will be in a trance.
I hear a voice right now, and they're telling me to comment on the Last Supper.
Okay.
He said to tell
that's very
your
good.
viewers, to tell your viewers, it was not the Last Supper.
Okay.
It was the last séance.
Good.
And the word séance is French for sitting. And years ago, when there was a good medium anywhere, there was a medium that always had a group of people. As Jesus had 12 students, well, he brought them there and used them as batteries. And they sat around in a circle, and each person had the same seat every time. They were all sitting on the floor on a lambskin. And he was drawing energy from all of those. He would go into trance, and the ascended masters, the great ones that taught him, were using his body to teach them, hoping that they will all develop like he is. But only Peter, James, and John developed. The others were flunkies, as I'm concerned. They did not develop as he wanted them to. And you can check that out. All you viewers can check this out.
Now, with that, that's a good segue for what we want to talk about on this show, which is healing with wine. The Last Supper, we're in the Thanksgiving holiday season. Our viewers will see this a couple weeks later, but we are live in that time now. And we thought, what better time to discuss something that most of us may be sharing at the holiday season, which is wine. And the fact that there has been an awful lot of research, and there's a lot of knowledge that's come through both Sidney and Carl with respect to wine being very healing. So we can go into the Last Supper. We can talk about the significance in church.
No, I want to comment on what you just said about the wine.
Okay.
As a minister, I see you creating a big sin here tonight.
Okay.
You are creating a sin
What would that be?
because you've got bottles of wine here, and they're corked, and it's forbidden that we open them. It's forbidden that we open them.
Yes.
And you've got that other awful stuff here, I think is just pure grape juice. I'm going to drink the white stuff, which is water. I think this is a sin.
We do have a little wine here for demonstration purposes. My father actually privately makes wine out of his home. It is not for sale. And I have some cherished bottles that I'm not quite ready to open yet. But I did bring these here for demonstration purposes. And we do have a couple glasses. Although they are filled with grape juice, we thought it would still lend itself to a good demo for the evening. Of course, Carl and Sidney disagree. They'd rather have the real thing. But those are the rules. And we also have a pipe here, so that some of our viewers will see another aspect of healing that can go along with what's called a wine ceremony. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. What I had first learned with respect to wine is that wine, obviously red wine, comes from the red grape. And it's commonly known between Sidney and Carl in these circles as the ascended grape. And what I'm going to do with that, I don't know who wants to start first, but I'll turn it over to whoever
Well, just
wants to.
before I left my office, just before Sidney drove in this afternoon, and before we left, Spirit told me to remind the viewers that the grapes were brought to this planet 450,000 years ago from another planetary system. This was not populated until those Earth travelers, no, that's the wrong word. They discovered this planet and they came here. This is why they said it was brought here by the gods. Well, that's why they call them the gods. They were very tall, about 9 foot tall, those people. They came here and settled, and they taught the people then, and for hundreds or probably thousands of years, people found out that God was within themselves. And they left this planet, and when the brain shut down, people became limited, and they went back to their own planetary system. And they told me, and don't ask me where this is because I don't know, they said the seeds of Merlot grapes came from the 23rd universe.
Wow.
And don't ask me where that is.
Right.
Somewhere out there.
Okay.
But so many people think this is the only planet in this universe. It inhabits people.
Right.
But they tell me this is the only planet that have guns and bombs.
What's interesting to go along with what Reverend Hewitt just said is that in the Jewish religion, they do a lot of things they don't understand. But one of the things that they do is they have a lot of ceremonies starting off with wine. And the blessing over the wine is, blessed art thou, Lord our God, King of the universe, who brought forth the fruit of the vine. And that, to me, that sounds very similar to thanking them for bringing it from another place.
Yeah.
Who brought forth the fruit of the vine. So that it kind of ties in with what they just said.
And they told me also, to make sure I tell the viewers, that Jesus drank a lot of wine, because the water in that part of the country, and I've been over there, you wouldn't dare drink the water. And that he drank a lot of wine, and he loved it, but only the red wine.
His
white.
first miracle was taking water and turning it into wine. That's in John chapter 2, where he's attending his sister's wedding, and his mother comes up to him. He just returns from being away for 8 years or whatever it was when he was out traveling, and he came back. His spirit told him that his sister was getting married and he should leave right now so he'd get back in time.
It was Moses that told him. Remember, Moses was his control, just like Lone Eagle is my control,
Okay.
and Elijah was one of his spirit teachers.
Right.
And, you know, if you understand this, it's in the Bible. It's as clear as crystal. He had these two entities in spirit, and those were the two entities that appeared to him on the Mount of Transfiguration. They appeared there so that his 3 advanced students would see it, witness it, and tell the world that.
So there's no accident that wine is really throughout the Bible and is used in many ceremonies, but they
Right.
just don't understand it.
Right.
Okay, so we're here to understand that today.
So basically what happened was that Mary, his mother, came up to him and said, they have no wine. And Jesus said to her, woman, what do I have to do with you? My hour has not yet come. In other words, he's saying, I can't, I'm not doing miracles yet. What do you want from my life, But he was convinced to do it, and they brought in these stone jars of wine and water, and they were all filled with water, and he went through and they lined them up in rows, just like toy soldiers would be. And he walked up and down the rows, and I understand he held his hands over it.
Like this.
And as he was doing it, he changed the vibration of the water, the frequency of the water, from water into the frequency of wine. And he did that through the power of thought. And because it was stone jars, they were all encased in darkness, so he was able to do that. So there's a lot of what mediumship takes place in the dark, because in order to adjust vibration, it has to be dark.
Like these precipitated art pictures.
That's right.
They were
Okay.
in the dark. They were in a dark basket. So because the water was in a dark, opaque container and no light could get in there, he was able to adjust that. And they took the wine out and they poured it out, and it was the most delicious wine anyone had ever tasted.
Now, Carl, you have an interesting story you wanted to share with us about a trip you had taken to Charleston,
Charleston.
and you were in a hotel room.
Yes, the first, this is back in the early 80s, I believe. The Holiday Inn downtown Charleston had been bought out by Best Western.
Okay.
And they started at the top of the hotel, remodeling everything and working down. And they were not renting any rooms. And so the lady in Charleston, it was a lawyer's wife, she could sell an Eskimo a refrigerator. And so she went there to the office, and she convinced them that this very important person was coming into Charleston, and that would they possibly open one of their rooms on the 3rd floor for him. Well, I don't know how she managed this, but she pulled that off. And I was the only one on the 3rd floor, which was the top floor, that night. It was a gorgeous room. They had just finished it. And I was so tired from driving that I pulled a chair back away from the bed, and I sat down, and I had pulled my shoes off, and I put my legs up on the bed, and this big picture view window, I could see the bay, I could see the ocean, and it's a beautiful view. And just as I sat down, I heard a voice say to me, and it said, "Are you ready for a teaching?" Well, I almost said, "No, I'm not, I'm tired." But I said, "Yeah, I suppose so." And then they told me about they told me about when Jesus was speaking to the elders when he was supposed to have been with his mother and father after they went and paid their taxes.
Mm-hmm.
And they thought that he was with the caravan with these other young children.
Mm-hmm.
And when they stopped at a watering hole or something on the way back home, they went to check on the kids, and they found he was not there. And they were very angry, like any parents would be. And they turned around and they had to go back quite a ways to get back to to Jerusalem. And as they were walking down this street, they heard his voice coming out of the temple, and they walked inside, and sure enough, he was up there teaching the elders. And
he was how old at this point?
He was 12.
12, okay.
And they were really upset at this. And but there was one of the rabbis that were there, Rabbi Barchi. I can't pronounce it exactly, but that's close. He was very much aware of a secret society that was way out in the desert. And he would never talk about this, but he knew of that secret society. They were called the Essenes. Mm-hmm. And after hearing this young boy talking, he knew that he was gifted and that he needs to get into that school of the Essenes. And so when the parents finally persuaded him to leave the temple, go out with the caravan, and you can imagine the language they must have been using, that boy. And so Barchi was walking with them, and he told them to let the boy go on ahead because he didn't want the boy to hear what he had to say to these parents. And he told the parents about this school, this mystery school, as he would often talk. And if they would release the boy to him, he would enter him in the mystery school because they couldn't do anything with this boy. I mean, at 12, he was equivalent to 25, you see. And so they gave him permission to take the boy to the mystery school, which was 2 days hiking across the desert. Way out in the desert, there was an oasis, and the Essenes, they sort of had a business there, you know, of other people crossing the desert. Mm-hmm. They would stop there and trade camels, get water, that type of thing. And so they put him, he was brought there and he was entered, and these people that were there, they were all gifted with the gifts of the Spirit, and they could see the auric field around him, and they knew he was very, very, very gifted. And he was there only 3 weeks, 21 days, 3 weeks. And he told them that he had decided to go on, and he wanted to go to other countries to teach, and he went to different places to teach. And it was during that time, it was during that time that his mother had a baby, and it was a girl. And it was then 14 years later, this event was happening, that he was over in India, I think it was, and he heard a voice, and the voice was coming from Moses. Don't forget, Moses had been dead 1,400 years? Mm-hmm. 1,400 years when he was born. And so Moses told him that your only sister is getting married, and told him when the wedding was going to take place. It was going to be on a Friday. Would that have been the Jewish holiday?
No, there shouldn't have been. You can't get married on Friday. Maybe Saturday.
Maybe it was Saturday.
Tuesday. Tuesday's a good day for them.
Anyway, he changed his schedule so that he would be back in Jerusalem the day of the wedding. And when he came in, it was then that he came through the back door because there were so many people milling around the front of the house. And they had gone there uninvited, hoping to see their famous son. They didn't even know what he looked like, but they figured he will show up at his only sister's wedding. And so he came through the kitchen in the back, and his mother didn't even seem to be anxious to see him because she hadn't seen him in many years. Sure. But she was more concerned about her guest that did not get invited, and so she didn't have enough wine. And that was when he created his first miracle. And when he said his hour has not come, he wasn't sure enough of himself that he had developed enough to change the molecules of the water, you see? And when Moses told him, today is the day, you can do it. And that's when they brought in the big jugs, those great big jardinières full of water. and everything else, and he ran everybody out of the kitchen because he did not want their vibrations, their thoughts, because that would change everything. And he got them out of the kitchen, and he says, and don't any of you come in this kitchen until I open the door for you. And so he went along, as Sidney was demonstrating a while ago, changed the molecules of the water to taste a certain way, be a certain amount of nectar, tasting, sweet, just perfect. And when he opened the door and his mother came in, he took a dipper and filled, and he said, Mother, try this. She looked at it, and she noticed it was not clear like water anymore. It was a beautiful color. She smelled it. It smelled great. She drank it, and it was the best tasting wine she'd ever had. And then her eyes started flashing because it was really
Strong.
having its effect on her. And she scooped it in another one, and she could look another. By that time, she was feeling quite mellow. And she had plenty of wine for all of those people plus. And I think a lot of them got bombed that day at the wedding. And this was his first miracle. This is the first thing that he'd ever done, because he did not have the confidence in himself that he could do it. So it was Moses telling him, you can do it. Now, this is the last sentence I have here. My old Indian, he don't mind me calling him old, because God, he is old. And he's come through many times when I didn't think I could do a healing or something, and he says, let's go to work, we'll do something here. And you heard about the boy that came in that time, that he did not have a lining in his stomach. Well, that was when the old Indian says, we can do it. And the boy laid on the floor in my office, because there was no couch or anything in there. And I sat down in the lotus fashion side of him, put my hands on his stomach, and it was his father who drove a Sunoco gasoline truck that pulled in the driveway next morning. And he came over and he says, I want to thank you for helping my son. I said, who? I don't even know. I don't recognize you. And he says, my son. And then he called his name out. And it was the boy that was there 2 days before that.
Wow.
And 6 months later, the boy showed up in church on a Sunday. Were you there?
I think I was.
He asked me for permission to speak to the congregation, but I didn't recognize the kid. I really didn't recognize him, and I was wondering, what the heck is he going to say to all these people? You know, he's only about 17, 18. And he told them the whole story, and there wasn't a dry eye in the house. And he's been back to me since. Up to that time, he was on baby food. Couldn't eat pizza, couldn't eat anything with spices, because for some reason or another, the stomach did not have any lining in it. But the old Indian said, we can do it.
You know, I have two thoughts. The first that just came to me now is for our viewers who are watching this. Does this sound like the work of the devil, folks? Does this sound like
I'm glad you
something
inserted that.
heinous or horrible or scary? It's not. It's good. If you're afraid of it, you should stop and look at your lack of knowledge. That was the first thing. The other thing is that when you share these stories, or I should say these lessons that you have been told, it's as if you're there. Because I can guarantee that there aren't any Bibles out there that go into the detail that you go into, and the little things and the little movements that you see and the gestures of the people that are going on at this time. And it really is all of that little in-between stuff that puts this together and really gives light to the truth about what really was going on at that time. And again, you're not going to see that in any Bibles.
It's true.
There's one thing I really wish I had. I really wish I had the experience on film, just like it's being done in this studio, of that first time that my father came back through a trance medium in Upper Maine, and I was told to go up there. Spirit told me to go there. I didn't even know where I was going. And when I got there and we were sitting back, we were 5 seats from the front, And I remember the reporter sitting side of me. He was from the Hartford Courant. And he would continually ask, he says, is this for real? You know, that type of thing. He was a real skeptic, real scoffer, but he had his tape recorder and he had his notebook and all of this stuff. And my father took over the body of this medium. I only wish I had a picture that people could see the tears coming down the face of the medium, because my father would cry at the drop of a hat. And he called out my name through the medium. He says, I want to speak to my son, Carl Hewitt. This guy the reporter almost died, because he knew darn well I had not had a chance to talk to anybody. And then later on he says, are you sure you didn't know that man? And you called him up and you told him all of this stuff? I felt like biffing him one. And my father came through, and then one of my brothers came through. The brother that treated me so badly, he came through the same medium, and he begged me to forgive him for all the bad things he did towards me. And that was when I put him in the corner. I said, you tell me that there's nobody there that can forgive you? I said, do you realize what you're saying to us here? That we can dump everything we do bad on Jesus' shoulders and he will forgive us? I said, something's wrong with this picture. And he says, no, he says, you're the one that I have to ask forgiveness about. He says, there is no one here to do that. He says, the church created that. Can you understand why I'm so much against some of this teachings that's out there, and how they've got the people wrapped around their finger through mind control? You better talk about something else. I'm warming up here.
So, what is the importance with respect to healing and red wine? Who wants to start?
The scientists have come up, the red wine has this chemical in it. I think the name is retinol, something like that. That's resveratrol.
Resveratrol.
Yeah, resveratrol. And that it's supposed to be very helpful for the brain. And that it makes connections with thoughts and things like that. And so the doctors have determined that a small amount of red wine every day is really quite helpful. Helpful to the body.
I've been hearing that a lot in the news myself. There was red wine, and they talked about dark chocolate, something to do with that.
Yeah, because that same chemicals in dark chocolate.
Oh, it
too.
is? Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Of course, I do my own research, too, and I wanted to share that just in a little bit. But there's something unique that you do at the church that has to do with wine, and also, oh, you have it already, and also smoking a pipe. And I wanted you to share that between the two of you with our viewers, because I've been lucky enough to view and participate in a couple of these, what we call wine ceremonies. And I want you to share as much as you can with our viewers about that.
Well, the wine ceremony, it's more for learning. It's more like a teaching tool than it is for healing.
Okay.
But what it does is that if you drink enough wine in a short enough period, it allows the knowledge that you're going to hear to go directly into your soul. And it bypasses, not so much bypasses the brain, but it gets recorded directly, so you have this direct knowledge of it that's recorded for everlasting. The thing about it is that you have to, the amount of wine you have to drink is substantial. It's like 2 glasses in quite a short period of time. But so what you have to do is mentally kind of have an intent that you're not there to party, and you're not there to go wild, and you're not there to get drunk and to forget what's going on. But that you have to mentally set yourself to say that this wine isn't going to, I'm not going to get drunk on this, and you have to kind of stay focused on the lesson so that you get it. And when you do that, you'd be surprised how much wine you can drink and you don't really get drunk. I mean, you'll have a little bit of feeling in an altered state, but not to the extent that you get giddy and all this other stuff.
Okay. So this is not an excuse to get together and party and drink lots of wine.
Not at all.
Okay.
In fact, that's a great misuse of the wine, because the wine ceremony is very sacred.
Okay.
Very sacred.
And if you're going to be drinking wine, you should be careful of who you're drinking it with.
Yeah.
Because if you're with the wrong group of people, you're still going to have the same process going on, and you're going to have garbage recorded in your soul. Religions also use this technique, by the way, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So that's the basic essence of the wine. The Greeks used it. The Greeks had what they called the symposiums. Aristotle and Socrates used to have symposiums where they used to teach, but they used to have wine while they taught. So in other words, what they were doing was recording their lectures directly into the souls of the people that attended.
Carl?
Well, another thing, too, is necessary is to smoke pipe tobacco, not cigarettes. Cigarettes are poisonous. And when you smoke the tobacco in the pipe, it doesn't have any of those chemicals in it. And the smoke goes into the palate. And in the palate, that soft palate, there's some minute openings in there that tell me what that chemical is that's in there.
I don't remember the chemical.
It goes right up through there, and it activates the brain.
Is it nitrous oxide?
Huh?
Nitrous oxide?
Something like that, yeah.
Okay. All right.
And it activates the brain, and there's a time while you're having wine ceremony that you have to do this. Now, I would suggest that people viewing this don't go out and be silly enough to buy your wine and to pipe tobacco, because you've got to be taught how to do this. And when the time comes, and in the next 2 or 3 years, this will be known to, I would say, most people here on the planet.
And,
this is something that a lot of people don't want to hear. This is something that happened in ancient times. For instance, when Jesus had his students, they were going to the upper room every night. This was a seance every night. And he was teaching them in his latter days. They used a lot of wine, and they used tobacco. And this is why today the church uses this thing that they go with smoke. Well, some people says that was to kill the odor of the animal's blood. No, it wasn't. They were trying to duplicate the smoke that was in the upper room from the boys all smoking a pipe.
Okay.
This is what he was teaching.
All right.
See, when you draw in on the pipe, you're not supposed to take it into your lungs.
No.
You're
Okay.
just supposed to put it into your mouth, because you know the spot where you have postnasal drips sometimes if you're
Right.
sick.
Right.
Well, that's where the opening is that goes straight up to the brain. So the chemicals in the smoke will go through that passage and go right to the brain and trigger off the reaction that's supposed to be triggered off.
So wine and the tobacco, whatever is in these two products, actually has a positive effect
Right.
in allowing you to be more receptive to learning.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and then whatever is going on in the brain is connected with that.
I'm not supposed to say this on this TV, but I'm going to. And they, in the control room, they might cut it out. But they've told me that Merlot wine is the best wine of all.
Okay.
It's the best red wine on the planet.
Okay.
And that this is the wine that everybody should drink. In fact, they say it's good for you. There's other wine, it's got all kinds of junk in it.
Okay. So because of the red grape connection and the way that this particular wine is fermented or processed.
And again, they said that red wine did not originate here. It was brought here by the gods 450,000 years ago. And some people think the planet has only been here a few years, just before the Bible was written.
Now, you touched upon something a couple times in the show tonight, and that had to do with being around the right kind of people in the wine ceremony or when you're doing healing. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit. Why is that important?
It's important because thoughts are things. And the people that's watching this program, I'm sure that at one time or other they've walked into a room full of people and they feel, I got to get out of here. I got to get the hell out of here. And they get out of there because they have walked into a wall of negative energy created by the people and their thoughts. You understand?
Yes, yes.
And then once in a while you'll meet a person brand new, a stranger to you an hour ago, and you feel so good with that person, you just want to stay there and be with them. You see? It's because that person radiates nothing but pure, positive thoughts, loving thoughts. Understand?
Okay,
In,
thank you.
most people know that the Jews celebrate Passover with a Seder. A Seder was based on the Greek symposiums. And during the Seder, you have to consume four complete glasses of wine. And it's my theory, knowing what I know about wine ceremonies now, because basically that's what this is a grand wine ceremony,
Right.
is that it was used to kind of almost keep people in line, because all these people are drinking this wine and listening to the same story about the Passover service, what happened,
Right.
what happened there. And as far as I'm concerned, that whole service is a little bit askew. It bypasses all the psychic phenomena of it. It bypasses Moses altogether. But it's a way of almost what I would call brainwashing, because it's bringing a very skewed story in, and it's cementing it in with the wine.
Okay.
And I think it was deliberately set up that way.
So that could be dangerous
Yes.
if it's used for the purpose of convincing somebody of something that may not be entirely the truth.
That's right.
Very interesting. I had researched something, or actually it fell into my lap as things usually do, about red wine beating lung disease. And I wanted to share that really quickly
Sure.
with our viewers. We have about 2 or 3 minutes left. And this is out of London, and it said red wine could be used to treat a lung disease that is caused by smoking. Researchers at Imperial College London said in a paper published on Tuesday in a British medical journal. And it said a component in red wine called resveratrol
That's it.
seems to dampen down the inflammatory process in chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Smoking is the main cause of COPD, which causes the lungs to deteriorate, making it difficult and eventually impossible to breathe. From tests on 15 smokers and 15 COPD patients, the researchers found that the resveratrol almost completely wiped out the production of interleukins, powerful chemicals which result from the inflammation. It also said it's an antioxidant found in the skins of fruits such as red grapes, from which red wine is made. It also said many scientists are looking into the apparent benefits of wine to counter heart disease, cancer, and other problems, though experts warn against patients trying to imbibe to counter their ailments, meaning don't just go out and drink tons of it and assume you're going to get better. So this was dated October 29th of this year, and it's information that fell into my lap, and it's very interesting to see that there are alternative ways to heal. And
If
with
anybody
red wine.
asked me about this, I would tell them that I would advise them to drink 4 ounces of this Merlot wine every evening before they go to bed.
4 ounces.
4 ounces.
Okay. Unfortunately, we don't have much more time for the show tonight. I suppose we can always go on and on and on, and it's always such a pleasure
Turn
diving
the
into
cameras off so we can open a bottle.
diving into the history of these different things. So with that, I want to say thank you to Sidney Schwartz
You're welcome,
and
Tina.
Reverend Carl Hewitt.
You're welcome, Tina.
I want to say thank you to our viewers, and I also want to remind you that their book is still available, My First Encounter with an Angel, Revelations of Ancient Wisdom. The address and phone number will appear at the end of the show. The phone number is 443-3201. That's 443-3201. We also have an email address, making_known@yahoo.com. And tell your friends about the show. And until then, be well.